Yeah, so this is a pretty normal position that some wave defense run might find themselves in. I mean, the details might be different, but the general setup of like you're mining some iron, you're processing some iron, you're mining a bit of copper. Maybe the next step is mining more copper. Maybe the next step is some petroleum or something. At some point, you're going to need to build some steel, and I quite like the way wave defense builds steel because like the top 8 runs all do it in completely different ways, and none of those 8 ways are how it happens in a normal speedrun. So I thought I'd do a quick thing on like a survey on how wave defense builds steel as kind of a microcosm of the variety I like in wave defense. Like the normal way of building steel is you get like a new one of these things. Let's pretend that this is. Let's also prioritize this. Let's pretend that this is a new belt of iron and copper, of iron and coal coming into the base, and you do a thing like you go, and you get, you do a whole belt's worth of this stuff. Haven't done this in ages, and then you get a bunch of inserters, and you run down it one side for the whole thing, and then you do this kind of business, which I haven't done in ages, but that's fine. And you get good at this stuff, and you can do this fast, and people do, and this is let's do some of this as well. There are a lot of different ways to build steel that get built in non-speedrun runs, but I'm gonna say in every route other than Gotlap, this thing here is how steel gets built. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Like the first reason is you just build a whole line like that. The first reason is in every other speedrun setting you don't have technologies better than this. Like you don't have the substations or the medium power poles or the personal robots or the steel furnaces or any of that kind of stuff, and this is like you just build this is the easiest way to get all that done. The second thing about it is in every other speedrun setting, and again other than Gotlab, you build the first one by hand and then you just copy and paste large blocks of steel smelting to wherever you need it next. You never actually rebuild the thing a second time. The other thing that's super useful, especially about having this mixed belt of coal and steel, is you can do things where you'll have like explosives here, and actually not like that, you do it further away. Explosives there, and then it's usually an assembler too, although whatever else, because one of these things can get the coal and hand it across to the other, which then makes all your landmines, and that's like a nice way to have your petrochem right next to your steel. And also because this coal goes on the inside, it's often provided via a splitter rather than via inserters, which means you've got much higher throughput for this than you usually do for your other inserter fed coals, which means it's also good to put like plastic next to this thing as well. So this is like a pretty common thing to end up doing, and there are like a couple of wave defense players that end up building something like this that looks like that, but none of them actually build it that way because we've got better stuff we can do in wave defense rather than put down 2 stacks of inserters just with our hands. But there's also what I mean. It also starts off even simpler than that, because in wave defense you don't actually need that much steel. Like in normal runs you need a pile of steel to make your silo. You need sustained steel for your blue science. You need a lot of steel for your purple science, and so extending this is with new ore is just a thing that you do as part of your run, that you then need to like just consider resources that you pour into your base. In wave defense there's a slightly different thing that happens, where you don't need any of that sustained steel. You need to start off making a lot of belt and making a lot of inserters and making a lot of mining drills, and you kind of don't need the steel in any great volume until quite a bit later. And the exact amount of steel depends on like how much petrochem you're building, how many assemblers you need. Everyone needs like a bit over 1,400 in order to make the LTS. But then, how many landmines do you need if you're doing landmines? How much artillery do you need if you're doing artillery? How many beacons do you want to build? All that kind of stuff. And so, like, we're not going to look so much at like the exact amount of steel you need, but just the different ways that people build it. And like one of the interesting ways like that it gets built is like right here on the patch. I've seen a couple of people do this, and we're also not going to talk about like what's better or worse, and we're also not going to use the examples of me building these as evidence of how fast these are built, because you know people have muscle memory, that's why they're good at stuff. But like I think it's Anti that just straight up does. I don't know that he powers it with substations like this, or like powers all of it with substations, but he just does drills into electric furnaces, into steel furnaces, and then, you know, power all of this with some coal, and that's him making steel. Let's add some more of these. I don't remember exactly how it powers it, and it kind of doesn't matter. But yeah, that's a steel build. Simple as fast. I think he uses all 8 steel furnaces and then another 2 mining drills into 2 furnaces into 2 more furnaces, I think. Something like that. But again, details not really important. So advantages of this: really easy to set up, doesn't take much infrastructure. Disadvantages: your steel is over here. It's not like in here next to your base, so at some point you've either got to go and get it, you might have to refuel it, there might be belt delay if you're connecting this to somewhere else that needs it, but also that might be effort that you're happy to pay later when you're getting this online easily and quickly, first off. But the most important thing about this, another really interesting thing that I like is, just get rid of all these at the moment. Like I talked about the split of iron versus steel and needing more iron at the beginning, and the thing about this, and actually there's someone else that just does, I have them over here, I hardly ever use these things, a bunch of these into a bunch of these into, I don't even think they get boxed. I think it's just that. I don't know that they, again, have the power poles in the same place, but I think it's, I heard the stat, Unique 2 did a thing like this, and you just make sure all these things have coal, and you have, you know, a buffer of, in this case, 600, and that's just so your steel's slowly arriving. The nice thing about both of these is that you don't start with the steel. You start just with iron, and so you've got an extra source of iron for infrastructure, which helps build you belts, it helps build you undergrounds, it helps build you mining drills, it helps build all your power grid, it helps build you the inserters and the assemblers and all the things that need iron. And then once you've quickly got your infrastructure online, you can come back here, get the last iron for the last time, pivot it into steel, let's do that properly, and like that's a nice way of getting your infrastructure online as quick as possible, and then pivoting that production into steel when you kinda don't need that much iron because most of your mining drills are already built and placed. So that's cute. Let's go back and load the other save. This one. And the thing I do is kind of a variation on the same thing, because I grab this and do that, and this is like also only a thing that works because of personal robots. Like this is not a thing that's viable at all in kind of any other route, because you don't have the personal robots. But it's so the idea of this is I start with one big iron line and it does a bunch of infrastructure stuff. I then plug in another line of iron and at that point I have lots of iron providing lots of infrastructure, a bit of steel if I actually bothered to power this in this instance. And then later on in the game, these two belts of iron, which are currently doing a pile of infrastructure stuff, when I add the rest of the copper, provide all the iron I need to make all the chips. And then the infrastructure, well actually this thing I added kind of recently, but the infrastructure doesn't get as much iron towards the end because it just doesn't need that much. And so we've kind of done, in the base, kind of a similar, at a high level, a kind of similar thing to the patch stuff where we're pivoting iron supply into steel, which is, I don't think, a thing you see in any other category, which is cool. Yeah, so the alternative to this, at a high level, and also not saying any of these things are better, and certainly not implemented by me, because, you know, a lot of other people are faster at doing these things, is to make more steel, like kind of more similar to the default settings or 80% way, where you make steel based on new ore you're bringing into the base. So actually let's load that thing again, because I'd rather have not all that stuff in the way. And I think the most interesting variation on this is Jan's stuff. So suppose this is a new belt of iron ore and coal, and we've got our iron online, we've got some copper, whatever, we've put down some more miners, and now we've got more of this stuff. And he does a really interesting thing where I don't even think I have yet. I need to make filter inserters for this. Give me some chips so I can make filter inserters. And also I need these back, because he does it with the steel things, because it's, you know, it's interesting and weird, and that's why we like it. He does a thing where he'll have a pair of these filter inserters going in. Like, I don't think he sets it up with the mechanics that I do. I think he's got a much faster and better way of doing things. But this first one gets a blacklist on iron plates. The second one gets a whitelist on coal, with the result that, so this filtering circuit will pick up both iron ore and coal. So this one's making iron plates. It will hand it over to this one, which is only inserting coal and is putting out steel. And like, this has some interesting failure modes. Like, if you're, yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit after we've set up the rest of this stuff. So I'll have a bunch of these things. I don't know exactly how many. And then if he grabs more of this type, I'm pretty sure he does this. I don't know if he powers it the same way, but he'll have extra stuff just producing more iron in the same lane. And so the single half belt of iron ore, he splits in a ratio, and like a careful ratio, between steel production and iron production, which is pretty cool. And then over here he does a big thing where he splits off. So he needs to sort, actually probably the first one is coal, because I don't, no, actually he takes coal through, doesn't he, because the coal is also, like, he moves, I think that's how he gets the coal into petrochem. I'm not entirely sure, but there's like a big stack of like filtering off all these things so that he gets the things he wants, and then I think the coal ends up coming out here. I'm gonna clear all these things off. And you know, that's cool. I haven't seen that before, and I don't think that's turned up a lot. But there is an interesting failure mode, which he almost certainly always works around, is that if you're ever short on coal, and these processes don't run, then the iron ore backs up, and you can't, like, this guy can't put the steel on the belt, and then one of these filters stops, and then nothing gets through, and, you know, not having enough coal kills a run. And that's, like, to be honest, that's fine, because there are a bunch of different cases and a bunch of different speedruns where if you don't get enough, like, copper coming through, your run is just dead. So if you have a coal shortage, you're probably already having problems, and so I don't actually think I mean, it's clearly not a problem because he's already faster than me, but yeah, we're kind of seeing part of this issue because I'm not boxing or processing any of this stuff, and then all these things just like this weird kind of ore sushi, which is, you know, when it's in a run and he's got a rest of a plan to use this amount of stuff in the right kind of proportions that are coming through, it's fine, it's cool, it does weird stuff, it's good. The other one that I'm not going to demo is, I think Zamultius has a weird thing where he, in like a kind of any percent style, the steel just gets made in the middle of a mixed build, and so it doesn't even happen here. Like he probably has some steel for infrastructure, but he doesn't build like a lane of steel that he uses for stuff. Anyway, this is a mess. Sorry, Jan, I've done terrible things to your build. Yours is always much tidier than that. But yeah, so those are some of the strange and unique ways of setting up steel. The normal way, because it's wave defense and because we've got personal robots, there are still new and interesting other ways that we can start to build those that are probably going to be more relevant to Rocket Rush. So the thing about Rocket Rush is you have all of the techs unlocked, but you don't start with steel furnaces, or at least, I mean, Rocket Rush is not being heavily contested yet, and so I don't think we've discovered a lot about it, but my feeling is that Rocket Rush is not going to start with the steel engines, or the substations, or the big power poles, or the medium power poles. We're just going to go in with a lot of infrastructure of the low-tech levels, like the basic inserters, the stone furnaces, the electric power poles, and just build things out wider that way, because that's how that works. But there are a couple other ways to build steel and wave defense that are already being built in wave defense that are kind of more informative for that situation. So let's do some of those. So suppose we're building steel. Actually, I'm just going to take this belt. So this is my new belt, and I'm going to do a normal kind of steel build, except in wave defense, because I got personal robots, I kind of only need to do 2. I mean, I could do it better than that. And if I put this thing here, then, okay, so this is not a problem that other people have. This is only a problem I have because I use substations. But you can do this and go like, do a thing. That's going to be a lot of steel now, and your bots are like quite happily running around and building a thing, which is fine. Like that did. I think this is something. I think this is the closest to Nephrem's way. I don't think he has these poles in. I don't remember if he has those poles in the middle, but it's something like that. He ends up with quite a normal looking steel thing with these guys looking like this and that kind of stuff, and then poles around the outside. And one of the advantages if you're Nephrem's is you've built steel like this in a lot of different runs. And oh yeah, the other thing that's kind of important, let's at least finish this off for completeness. You need to put coal on that side, otherwise it doesn't work. Or, fuel these things, whatever. If you've got the muscle memory for building this much of a thing quickly, that can work out really well for you. If you're not Nephrem's, there might be some faster ways of doing this that we can play with as well. So actually, let's load that again. Yeah, this one. In that, one of the things you can do, and this is like, it connects to exactly how you're building your iron smelting. But one of the things you can do, actually, yeah, let's talk about macros this way first. He does that, and then puts 2 of these there, and then has kind of a similar thing. Let's do the blueprints thing. You can make a tile. You can do that. Your bots are doing that. I don't know whether he does it with medium power poles or not. But I like the medium power poles because we have them, because you can just, with one run down the line, you can power all of those things. And so if this was our new belt of stuff coming in, and then, we got some coal here. That's quite a good way of, this one, that depending on what you're good at, that might be a nice fast way of building a lot of steel. There are other ways as well. Let's do this again. I think it's in the 1.0 run that I end up having. Yeah, it's the 1.0 one where the base is a whole lot smaller, and all I use is like a bunch of combat robots to do the death yo-yo thing. I actually needed some of these, because if you're in the situation where your smelting is such that you are in wave defense, so you've got the substations and you position things so that they're kind of hanging out the side, you can grab almost an entire lane, do that, and then do this other trick of grabbing a selection of inserters that have like a spare orphaned single inserter on either side, because then when you rotate that, you can fit it on either side of... Yeah, I don't have all the inserters. Well, I do have all the inserters. This is... that's now the same thing, up to the fact that I'm powering it with substations rather than any other kind of power pole, and like that range fits exactly. Like I'm powering all of the inserters, but not any of the belt, which doesn't need power, so it's fine. So that's another way that's kind of specific to wave defense that I don't think anyone really does. I think like there's one of the other player that builds a steel that looks kind of like this is sort, and I think I'm thinking of like the top 8 runs out of like I think there are like 10 or 11 on the leaderboard at the moment, so there's like a survey of like 8 or 9 people of like 80%, and Sorta does like a very similar thing, except he uses steel furnaces. I don't remember if he builds it, like I don't remember the mechanics of how they build it, so they probably have a way that's a lot smoother than me, but the point being, that's not what I wanted. The point being, there's like this is another distinct way of building your steel that's in the wave defense meta, which is kind of cool. I think I've actually done this. I think I've done 12. Yeah, you don't actually get that many steel furnaces in wave defense. You only get 20. But that's also another thing that happens. And these are also on the pattern of bringing in another half belt of iron, turning into steel. I think Nephrons and Macrosans Sorted all made steel out of the entire half belt, I think, not entirely sure, and I suspect because of that they would have ended up with a ton more steel than they needed at the end of the run, because I don't think you need that much. Jan is like the other player that I've seen that we get with the filter inserters does that weird thing that brings in half a belt of iron and converts some of it to steel and some of it to iron, and maybe he even gets the iron off from the concrete from there, not sure. But that's a thing you can do with, let's do this again. Yeah, so you can do a thing where, and like the way I do it, you get, because I'm splitting it off this lane and bringing it back the other way, you still get part of, like I can have any amount of steel I like, and it's kind of easy to add more, because all of this is just in a, it's coming off like so. And then this belt here, even though I'm not taking coal from this side, this still ends up with, like I still end up putting coal on the inside of that belt just so that I can continue to do the nice petrochem thing that I do all the time, that like a lot of players do, like having plastic here and then having like explosives somewhere down here and then landmines somewhere down there. That's like a super common thing. But the what was the other? Yeah, I did have another way that I was toying with that I ended up not doing because it didn't work out for me for reasons we'll get into, that was also of the pattern of, suppose we had a new belt of iron ore and coal, and like the reason this didn't work out for me is this was in addition to the 2 belts of iron I had, and I got to the game and I just didn't need this much iron. But the way it worked was I actually need my steel furnaces for this. And it was a very similar thing actually. It was like steel furnace. I think it was that many, not entirely sure, doesn't really matter. You know, something like this. And so this is not even a steel build at the moment, right? This is just more iron ore that goes, like it went in there or something, kind of doesn't matter. There was a way that was ingested into the base and did more infrastructure stuff, and so it started off being, is that actually 12? Yeah, it is. It started off being iron ore for infrastructure, and then at some point I grab like 8 of these and I pivot these the other way, and I don't think this actually turned up in a run, because when I was doing this it just didn't end up fast. But doing something like this, where again this is like the highly wave defense specific thing we talk about, where we start off needing iron to do all the belts and the inserters and the mining drills and all that kind of stuff, that, you know, the power grid, all that stuff takes a lot of iron, and then we get to a point where we don't need as much iron and we need a lot more steel, and so this takes actually less than, I think it's 12 in total. I think this is, oh no, I think that's, yeah, if this is 12 in total, that's going to be half a yellow belt, so that's going to like successfully process everything, and then this takes less than half a belt, and then this ends up being all 20 steel furnaces. So that was like a thing that I liked, but also didn't fit into the rest of the run. Like I would end the run when I had more than 2 belts of iron coming in. I would end the run with vast amounts of iron. It was like, it's not even worth spending all this time to mine all this iron. I'm much better off doing a thing where I'm pivoting away from this infrastructure. And because, yeah, you get to a point at the end of the game where you just don't need to build the infrastructure anymore. You just need a lot more chips, and you need mostly copper for that. But there are a couple of other ways to build the standard looking steel thing, which depends on how you build your main smelting. Actually, let's go back and do that again. Yeah, so the other variations are based on a thing like this, where you go, okay, that's my iron, that's my steel. Copy some small number of these, do all of that, figure out where my power is going, I guess. Like, that seems pretty nice, other than the fact that the bots are flying off in all different directions. If you're, like, maybe you're powering this with substations, in which case that works out kind of fine. Maybe you're powering it with medium power poles, in which case that works fine. The one that's relevant to Rocket Rush, and also relevant to how, like, that connects to how you're making your smelting lines, is, like, this only worked for me because there weren't power poles in between these things, because I was doing all the substation stuff. If I was powering all of these, if I was powering my regular smelter with normal wooden power poles, this doesn't quite shake out the same way. Let's do, I had a version of this where I hadn't built them all yet. Yeah, so if we had this, like, there's a really nice, I've seen a couple of people do this, a thing where you start with, you know, this is, you know, that's pretty normal, and then if you do this kind of L-shape thing, kind of, when you rotate them, the bottom power pole rotated around powers the other ones on the other side, so that's pretty nice. And then, you know, you get 4 of those. That's a full lane of mining. Let's do the rest of this for completion. It goes on there, does does that kind of stuff. And again, the point is not to be assessing how good these things look based on my implementations of them, because as in my constructions of them, because other people have better mechanics and better muscle memory to do the same stuff than me. The point is like the different patterns in which steel gets arranged. He said while we were doing iron smelting. But the thing about this with this rotation and these power poles ending up on the other side of the belt is you can't do this thing as easily. Like the first one works fine, the second one works fine, all the middle ones are powered, so that's nice, but you've got these extra power poles over here that are kind of in the way where you want to put the other inserters in some way, which I currently don't have because this is like early in this year. This is just on day 2 of the one, so I don't have the little maul over there that builds all the stuff that I'm trying to put down. So that's one of the ways that ends up different, and in that case, I guess you just do, you could just do the thing that, like Macros's thing still works. You can still, just wait to have all my bots get all this stuff out of the way. Like Macros's thing still works. If you've got 2 of them, you can still do that, and then that, and then I don't think I made that. I did not. This is why we're not judging these methods on my implementations, because that was still kind of slow. But you can still do that, but you're building it again instead of grabbing a whole slab of stuff at once. And so like the alternative would be something like, if we do that again, if we get some amount of these things, and then we put the power on one side. That step took a little longer, especially if I'm going to put the furnaces in the wrong place. That's just bad for everyone. Doing the rest of this stuff. Oh yeah, let's actually, power those inserters, and let's connect everything up. So if we've built our standard smelt lane in this way, with all of the power poles on one side, that means the other side doesn't have any power poles in between the inserters. And so we can do a full lane of steel by doing this, and putting it like here, and it's actually lined up properly, there and then there, and then we can grab this thing with the lone inserters on either side, pop those in, and then I guess we would be like running down here with Belton, running down here with a Belton. Other than the fact that I don't have all the inserters, is that faster or not? Not entirely sure. Like, that is a way of doing things. I think the other disadvantage, and this is like a thing to talk about later, is it can be quite advantageous with a personal roboport, especially with the amount of charge I've got, to be building smaller groupments that are closer. I think we're going to talk about that a lot more later in a different video, but yeah, that's like the other way, or another way of building steel with a personal roboport with stone furnaces and wooden power poles. It's probably going to be a lot more relevant in Rocket Rush, because my impression is, like wave defense, I do think that the pivoting from iron infrastructure to steel is a good thing, because it's a good way of getting more iron earlier when that's your bottleneck, but then not ending up with surplus iron you're not using later on when it's not your bottleneck. Whereas with Rocket Rush, you need more steel to build all your infrastructure, because you're not given any petrochem. You're not given actually you need to pretty much build all your inserters anyway. Well, you need to build all your assemblers anyway, other than, you get like, have I put any of them down? Oh yeah, I put 4 of them over there, so you get given 30, and you're going to need more than that. It's like not a big amount of steel, is it? Yeah, it's like 60 steel. It's like whatever. So that's going to be comparable. But in Rocket Rush, you also have to build a rocket silo, which takes a lot of steel, both for the electric engines and also for the silo itself. And so I suspect in that mode, bringing in more ore is going to be a thing, and also the lack of substations and medium power balls. I don't imagine buying those in Rocket Rush, but will lead to something, things that look more like the regular steel smelters like this, if not actually built with the same mechanics. Like I do not see anyone in Rocket Rush or Wave Defense running down with a huge line like this, because it's just not the effective way to do things. You want to do a small amount, copy and paste stuff, personal roboport. But yeah, I think that was mostly pretty much all of what I wanted to say. I just found the different ways of steel being made in Wave Defense interesting. Like it's pretty wild, and like a microcosm of Wave Defense that I like. That of, you take the 8 top runs in Wave Defense, and they all will build steel in a different way, and none of the way they build it is comparable to the way it's built in any other run, in any other category. And some of them look the same, but they still get built differently. So yeah, nice, good stuff. Wave Defense and steel.